So I guess we can start with the ramps, or I should say, I'll start with the first ramp. And at first sight, you look at something like this and it looks kind of childish and silly, and I'm sure a motocross rider would be like, why would you want to jump that? That seems pretty stupid. But I promise you that if it was stupid, I would have gotten rid of it a long time ago. This ramp here, it's one of the first, I would say, kind of designed ramps that I built. All these ramps, they're all made out of steel with plywood surfacing, and they're all TIG welded. So like they're not going to fail. This is not something you build out of wood, and this is not something you take lightly when you build it. So let's look at this ramp here. I'm trying to get out of the sun here. This is just basically it's kind of a triangle. It's symmetrical. I think it's a little over 3 feet high, and really, when I first built this, I was kind of like, wow, how am I going to ride over that? That looks pretty sketchy, right? Because you can't really roll this stuff, right? Like, none of these ramps you roll. Well, I guess the big one you can roll, but it's not very fun. But this ramp here, yeah, I remember the first time I hit it, I was like, wow, that's incredible. And now it's just kind of trivial, and I can do it on, I swear I could do it on my adventure bike if I really wanted to. But this is a cool design because it teaches you a couple things. I think mainly it teaches you about momentum. This plywood surface at first sight, people are like, well, why you have no traction on that? And I think they missed the point. You don't stop halfway on these ramps. You kind of launch yourself off of them, and it's all about momentum, right? These wooden ramps, or wood surface ramps, what they teach you is they teach you, how to like maintain momentum and commit to a certain ramp and hold that traction over a slippery surface. And I've hit these ramps in the snow. Like, it's not about traction on the surface of the ramp, right? It's about traction. It's about getting momentum to clear the entire ramp. And I think that's really what they teach you, right? They teach you how to really generate momentum before you hit something that has potentially kind of crappy traction on as its surface. And that's why these ramps are cool. And man, they're fun. Like, I hit this one all the time. It's super fun. It's pretty similar in both directions. Kind of also teaches you to, just kind of trust yourself and get over it. Teaches you how to loft the front wheel. It's a great obstacle. I would strongly encourage someone to build something like this. I would definitely make it wide like this, so you can kind of work your way up, right? When it's wide, what's cool about it is if you don't have the commitment to get over it, what you can do is just you can straddle it, and you can, worst case, you won't tip over to the side. I think the most dangerous thing about a ramp like this is tipping over to the side, not having enough commitment and kind of going over to the side, or hitting it wrong where you kind of endo, right? So awesome obstacle. I highly recommend something like this. It will teach you tons about generating kind of flywheel momentum and putting energy in your flywheel and generating momentum as you clear something like this. Super awesome obstacle. The next ramp I built was this kind of larger ramp, and I think what I was going for is I just wanted something bigger. I mean, I just wanted to kind of challenge myself to huck over something bigger. This ramp is probably 4 feet tall at the apex, right? It's got a steeper side, which is harder, and I've put dirt up on it so it doesn't move. And then it's got a ramp side on the other one. So this obstacle is great because you can do a lot of different things on it, right? You can ride it in 2 different ways. You can go, up the easy side and launch yourself this way, which is just basically like a flat ramp. It's still pretty scary if you haven't done it, but if you have your suspension set up properly, it's really not very hard. Or you can hit this face, kind of like a trials obstacle. And that looks kind of scary because it's steep, but it's the same principle as that ramp, but with more commitment. And you'd be amazed if you put energy into your bike and you loft the front wheel properly, how easily you will get over this. And it's super rewarding. And again, I think a key thing here is you want to make this wide enough to where if you don't have enough momentum, you can put your feet down and at least push yourself off and you don't go off to the side. I've pretty much mastered this obstacle at this point, to the point where I feel comfortable having it between 2 trees and not falling over to the left or the right. I don't know, I think it's been probably years since I crashed on this obstacle. It's pretty awesome hitting it both ways. definitely committing. You have to definitely launch yourself off of it, and I think in both directions, and there's no rolling over it. Same principles. You need a lot of momentum. You need to gather momentum in your bike so you don't need traction on the surface of the ramp, and clear it. Highly recommended. I think making it much steeper, taller is probably defeats the purpose of it. I think its main purpose is to teach you about commitment and teach you about generating momentum before you hit it. It's kind of a bi-directional version of the first one back there that I built, and yeah, just a little bit harder, a little bit scarier, but super fun. The next ramp is what I call the big ramp, and yeah, this is a much more significant obstacle in the sense of just its physicality. I mean, just building this thing took a lot more work and energy. You can see there are two identical ramps backed up to each other. Again, it's all steel, right? It's all TIG welded and painted and surfaced with plywood. You can kind of see, even with steel construction, I mean, you can see how much load gets taken up by these beams, and you can see them deforming. One of the nice things about metal too is it doesn't snap like wood. I would not consider building any of these out of wood. So if that's your only option, I would say don't even go this big. Like it's just a recipe for disaster. Anyways, back to this ramp. Yeah, this is a pretty tall ramp. This is over 5 feet tall here at the top of this. Not something you kind of take lightly. It's not the first ramp I would build by any means. But what's really cool about this ramp is because it's so wide, it's actually less scary than some of the smaller ones, because you can kind of ride up it, and then if you have to put a foot down, you have plenty of width to kind of step off and at least hold your balance and then roll off. This ramp is awesome because you can ride this thing in so many ways. I mean, you can roll it, which is fun, right? Totally fun. You can kind of loft the front wheel over, which is kind of cool, or you can just straight on jump it. What's nice about this ramp is that, it's not really, what it teaches you is not really, let me back up. It teaches you how to jump, but that's not the first thing it teaches you. The first thing it'll teach you is how to really gauge your speed, right? So at what speed can you roll it? At what speed can you loft the front? And at what speed can you just full on clear it? And to me, like, that is like super valuable, right? To figure out, okay, how much momentum am I going to carry into an obstacle, and what's going to happen with that momentum, right? I mean, the consequence of what happens over this thing, right, depends significantly on your speed, right? Like if you're just cruising over it, you'll just roll it, no problem, right? All you need is balance so you don't tip over to the sides, right? If you hit it a little faster, you'll loft the wheel, which has its own kind of feeling to it, right? And then if you get a little high, if you hit it a little faster, you'll start to clear it. And when you start to clear this thing and land flat, it's a rad feeling. I mean, it's awesome, but that's not where you start, right? So I would say this obstacle is really cool. Like, it's very cool because you can kind of safely kind of work your speed up and figure out, like, how much momentum do you have, what's going to happen at a certain speed, and you can learn to do that. Once you get a little better and you actually start jumping it, you actually start to really develop the principles of jumping, right? And you can do that with all these ramps. All these ramps I boost over. So what's cool about that is you figure out on all these ramps, you quickly figure out, like, where's my balance point? Am I too far forward? Am I too far back? How do I get neutral in the bike? And how do I control the bike pitching forward or pitching back? And I would say, like, these ramps are awesome at that. Like, they will teach you proper momentum, proper body position on the bike when you're in the air, and then what happens to the bike, as your wheels leave the surface of the ramp or the surface of the ground, and how do you stay calm in that situation, and how do you control that, that pitching forward and pitching back? Super awesome. And I would say, like, if you wanted to start somewhere, you could just build something like this small ramp here, which is very simple, right? This is like a very simple thing almost anyone can build, and that can teach you those things too in a much more kind of lower consequence manner. You can roll this thing, you can loft the front wheel and you can just totally launch off of it, right? So those are the ramps, and those ramps are pretty hard to build. I mean, they're TIG welded, and there's a lot of time and effort put into them, but man, the things they teach you about momentum and controlling the bike in the air and just having commitment over an obstacle is pretty indispensable. Highly recommended. I think you'll get your money's worth out of the material used to build these. I would start with something kind of smaller than that and kind of work your way up. I actually have a smaller version of that ramp down at my other track, which is pretty cool. So yeah, those are the ramps, and they've held up really well. These are about 3 years old, and yeah, it's just plywood, painted plywood.